Howdy, folks. I'm Jim Nash, your Oakland County Water Resources Commissioner, and welcome to Water by the Quarter. This show is here to educate and talk about our fresh water, our most important resource. And today we have a very special guest, Anna Sysling, the host of Detroit Public Television's PBS's Great Lakes Now. Anna is a well-respected multimedia storyteller and producer who has worked for the Mitch Albom Show, the Detroit Today with Stephen Henderson before joining Great Lakes Now. Her focus includes history, policy, climate, and social equity. I'm pleased to welcome you to talk about the new season of Great Lakes Now.
Hi, Jim. It's great to be here.
Great. I appreciate you being here. So you're the new host. Give me a little background on what your career has been.
Sure. Yeah. So actually, up until pretty recently, I was producing Great Lakes Now. Prior to that, I come from a background in public radio. So the TV stuff is fairly new. I've been doing it for the last couple of years and very recently moved into managing engagement and partnerships, which is really exciting for the Great Lakes Now initiative, and then also hosting the show. So we love Ward Detweiler. He is still very much a friend of the show, and he's going to be contributing boating segments and things that can get him out on the water still. So he'll still be a part of things, but I'm also really excited for my new role and looking forward to it. In many ways, it feels like things have been sort of slowly and organically leading up to this moment for me.
Well, that's terrific. I've been a fan of the show. I've talked to Mr. Detweiler before, and it's always been a very interesting show. So what is the new direction of the show? What are you looking at?
Yeah, so I should say, new host, but we're still very much committed to water issues, looking at climate change, and really centering the stories that are focused on communities throughout the Great Lakes region, stories that can engage and educate and inspire our audiences, but also get them to care and learn something about the region that they call home. So whether that is talking with scientists about ice coverage over the Great Lakes in the colder months, to going out and learning about the art of trail building for mountain bikers throughout the Great Lakes region, we've been sort of thinking about all the different ways that we can bring people into the fold and ultimately engage them and get them to care about this place a little bit more.
So this is more than just here, right? Where else does this show seen?
I'm happy that you asked. So yeah, we are a regional initiative, a regional show. We broadcast all throughout Michigan, and then we're also all throughout the Great Lakes Basin, even up into Canada. So things tend to fluctuate a little bit in terms of specific numbers of stations that air our show. It just kind of depends on the individual programming schedules. But we typically say between 20 and 25 stations throughout the Midwest, Great Lakes Basin air our program every month.
Well, that's good. Again, the Great Lakes is such a resource that we have to make sure we're protecting it, we're educating around it, because people need to be learning more about what we do here. Mm-hmm. So what are you looking to do in the coming few episodes? What are your coverage?
Yeah, so we always leave a few spots open. We have a pre-production program, or schedule rather, that still sort of makes my public radio, live radio head feel a little crazy sometimes, just at the amount of sort of planning and production that goes into building out every episode of Great Lakes Now. That being said, we don't have everything exactly, buttoned up in terms of episodes, but I can say we have some really cool stories in the works. Looking at one particularly that I'm pretty excited about is looking at the really delicate and fragile ecosystem on Isle Royale National Park. Yeah, we went out and talked with some wolf and moose scientists.
The population's really coming back.
Huh? Yeah. Well, it was so interesting to learn from these people who have been engaged in what is the longest predator-prey research study on the planet. And also to hear from the lead scientist of that study that there is no real perfect sweet spot or equilibrium. It's just kind of watching and understanding what is the interplay between the wolf and the moose. How do things continue to play out? What can we do to help support the overall health of the ecosystem and the balance between these two species? So that one's great. I'm really looking forward to that. We also have a pretty cool one looking at the ecological impacts of dam removal, which is something that, I think is happening and being talked about a lot more. So that's something in the works that I think is going to be pretty cool. And then we have another one actually about some pretty interesting archaeological findings in the Great Lakes region.
Well, that's neat.
Yeah.
Again, Isle Royal is something that people know about but don't have that depth of knowledge. And that's one of those things that you can really do well at. And I appreciate that because it's a very specific environment, balance there, and that's great. That's wonderful. I look forward to that too. So what kind of partnerships and collaborations are you doing?
Yeah, so part of me moving into this role of managing engagement and partnerships for the initiative has been, for me, it's been really kind of opening up what can partnership and collaboration really look like and mean for the initiative overall. And we have, I mean, the amount of talent and just cool people that I get to talk with and learn from and work with every day is so awesome. So part of me moving into this role has been, okay, we're still public media. We're, kind of a scrappy team in terms of it's not like we have a staff of 50 people. So how can we sort of maximize and think differently about what are people already doing that's great, that is really aligned with the Great Lakes Now mission, and how can we, bring people into the fold? So I've been sort of imagining and thinking about collaborations looking like everything from having sort of collaborative Instagram posts with people who are viral environmental content creators on Instagram and TikTok, to also working with some folks in the public radio world who have podcasts and programming that is really aligned with Great Lakes, doing, trying to figure out how we can imagine newsletter, thinking about newsletter promotional things and podcasts and film festivals, and, also, of course, finding ways for us to program in terms of content that ends up on the show, too.
Well, that's a process.
It sure is.
So where do you get your ideas for stories? Is it part of your partnerships and things, or do you might have a group that comes up with things?
It's a little bit of a patchwork. Definitely, I think the collaborations and partnerships that we have in place are a part of that. So like one such being the Great Lakes News Collaborative that we've been doing with our friends over at Bridge, Michigan, Michigan Radio, Circle of Blue. So that's something where we're constantly thinking about drinking water issues, water quality issues, and learning and talking about, all right, what are you doing over at Michigan Radio or Bridge? Is there a way that we can sort of partner up? So the dam removal story I mentioned a minute ago is actually something that's sort of a collaborative story that we're doing with Bridge, Michigan reporter Kelly House. So it can be things like that. And then it can also just be, as me and the executive producer of the program, Rob Green, are just sort of going about our daily lives, looking at different climate newsletters, publications, and just anecdotally talking with people in our communities. What are the climate issues that they are experiencing and thinking about firsthand? And how can we tell a story that is human and community-centered, but is also sort of indicative of a larger regional climate issue that will have appeal to the entire Great Lakes audience, which is, of course, if we're doing something in Illinois or Indiana, we're also thinking about how are folks in Ohio or Michigan going to relate to this story. So it's issue-oriented, but it's also finding a story that has, community and humans sort of at the center of it to hook people in, and then we can sort of illustrate something bigger.
Again, that's a really good way of approaching that, and I appreciate that because there's so many facets of all these things that it's hard to keep track of them all sometimes. And when you talk about climate, and I talk about climate a lot because it's affecting us dramatically. And you mentioned ice cover. That's one of those things that is getting less and less. In the winter, we're not getting those dramatic heat waves, 110 degrees like they do in Arizona down south. Our biggest impact is extreme weather, and it's getting much more active every year. We're seeing more of these kind of very large, either large storms or very small, fast-moving storms that can cause tremendous damage. So what give me a couple of a story or two that you've gotten real surprised that you didn't expect to find out what you found.
Yeah, well, I mean, I should say before I get into that, I kind of just want to make a note of the fact that in terms of stories that we're thinking about and really sort of like we're still kind of gestating in terms of how we want to go about approaching them and incorporating them into the show. One of them is definitely thinking a lot about energy and sort of overall the grid, really, resilience, adaptation, thinking about energy justice. So that's something that we're sort of grappling with, always thinking about infrastructure, water infrastructure specifically. And you talking about these sort of more erratic weather patterns and these really intense summer storms, especially that folks all over the Great Lakes region are seeing. One particular partnership that I'm pretty excited about that we have come into is actually working with PBS National, their climate programming. They said, hey, Great Lakes Now, we want to work with you. We want to watch how you engage and create dialogue and conversation throughout the region about different climate issues. So one that we have coming up is actually about flooding. So that's going to be coming up in November. But yeah, so I just wanted to make a note of that. In terms of stories, though, that have surprised me, I come from a background, I love gardening. Like, if I'm not working, if I'm not, doing the radio and the video stuff, I like to get my hands in the dirt. I like to be outside. And I think that some of the stories that have surprised me the most are the stories that are actually based in land tending and agriculture and thinking about all of the ways that water is so inherently a part of that. A recent story we did was actually talking with farmers based in the Niagara region who are having to adapt their irrigation systems because there's water scarcity is a real issue there, which I think people hear Niagara, they think Niagara Falls. There's no way that water scarcity is a problem there. So that was one recently that really surprised me.
Oh, we have areas in Michigan that have significant issues with their aquifer. And
yeah.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. And people recognize that. Trust me. Mm-hmm. In rural areas, people are very concerned about their water quality. Mm-hmm. Is there anything that really you just love? You mentioned the Isle Royal, and I could see that was something that you really found enjoyable and fascinating. So any other stories that...
I got to say, some of the things that I'm most excited about are someone who has, born and raised in Southeast Michigan. I've been living in Detroit for a decade. I'm thinking a lot about these issues around, like I said, energy justice, housing justice, environmental justice, the sort of role that equity plays in all of these really significant and critical climate issues. And part of the magic of us being a regional show is that I think when I sort of came into this new role, I zoomed out and realized, all right, we have to talk about these conversations and issues that are playing out in these urban centers all throughout the region. But there are so many issues. As you said, agriculture and water and folks who are living in these rural environments are acutely aware of that. And that's something I think a lot of city folks maybe don't necessarily realize. They're facing water issues too, but water issues of a very different kind. So something I'm really looking forward to is doing more of the stories about, whether it is kind of diving into a really magical landscape like Isle Royal or spending more time in these more rural agricultural areas throughout the region to really understand what are the sort of sensibilities in these communities? What are the different climate issues that are facing these municipalities in terms of, budget issues? Maybe population isn't as there aren't as many people, rather, as there are in some of these more concentrated urban areas. And what does that mean? What are the sort of issues that are impacting these other places that maybe I hadn't always thought about quite as much just living in Detroit and doing my work here. So I'm really looking forward to kind of spreading my wings and getting out and moving throughout the region and really creating more relationships, I think, with boots on the ground.
No, that's a great way of doing it. And again, outreach and interacting with the folks is great. Mm-hmm. They want to have somebody that's listening to them, that they see the problems, because a lot of people just don't, and they don't pay attention to them. So, my office does a lot around climate resiliency and climate change mitigation. So we're trying to build our infrastructure to make it much more resilient to these large storms. So not necessarily gray infrastructure, the big pipes and tanks and pumps underground, but green infrastructure. So when the rain falls, before it gets into the storm drains, it can be absorbed into the ground. Major thrust of what we're doing. And we're also working on a program in Pontiac, actually, at the wastewater treatment plant, that is allowing us to pull energy out of the solids in the waste. And we're the first in the state and the third in the country to do this new process, thermal hydrolysis it's called. Basically, it's pressure cooking the solids to break them down so we can get methane from them easier. All in airtight areas, so there's no leaks. And so my industry, water and sewer, uses about 4% of all the electric energy in the country, just moving and treating water. If we can switch that, and instead of using energy, produce energy, that would be a major thrust in terms of mitigation. So we could get this, we could produce methane without using fossil fuels, which is what's the driving climate change. So there's a lot that can be done. And if you're ever interested, we'd love to do a show you on this stuff because there's new technologies that are coming out that we're looking at would make us the most advanced wastewater treatment plant in the world for pulling energy out of it. So there's potential there that I think any wastewater treatment plant could do. So I just want to put that little seed in your head there.
Yeah, I got the pitch, Jim. Love that. Taking a mental note.
So where can people find your show? What's the best way to see it?
Sure. So folks can always check their local listings to see where and when Great Lakes Now is showing on broadcast. Also, you can always go to the PBS app and go to greatlakesnow.org, and you can watch all of the show there, too.
Yeah, they got some great shows. I've watched a bunch of them over the years, and it's just wonderful. What other environmental policy or concerns will you highlight this year? Do you think, going forward, what do you think you're looking at?
Yeah. So like I said, I think we're thinking a lot about the future of energy. We're thinking a lot about infrastructure, which honestly, I mean, talking a lot about green water infrastructure, stormwater infrastructure, that's going to be something that I think we focus on. It's sort of looking at what are the ways that we can mitigate, adapt, and sort of use what we already have? And then what are the ways that we can incorporate new technologies when it comes to infrastructure related to the climate, related to water? So those are going to be real focuses for us. And then, as I said, my background and sort of my approach to things is really always kind of thinking about the social equity piece of things. So I'm really excited when I was approached and asked, what do you think about being host? I was like, well, okay, I would love to be host. And I think for me to show up and be the kind of host that I really want to be, that means A, being able to move around the region, really engage with some incredible other, public media partners that we have all throughout the region, meet the folks who are on the ground doing this work. And also, I want to be able to launch an environmental justice series. So that is also coming out in September. We're going to start including a short excerpt of every different interview that I have. It'll be called Waves of Change. These are interviews with different environmental justice organizers all throughout the Great Lakes region. They'll be coming out once a month on greatlakesnow.org/waves of change, and we'll be including a short excerpt of each interview within the monthly broadcast.
Oh, that's terrific. Another thing we're doing, and one of those equity pieces is affordability. And when we had the pandemic hit, my office quit doing water shutoffs a week or so before the governor ordered it because we recognized that a disease like that is going to need water, sewage services because it's just part of public health. And we recognized that coming out of that, we were going to have to change how we did shutoffs. And so we've been working 2.5 years on an affordability program. We're actually going in front of the state legislature right now. Senator Chang is pushing a bill that to create. We'd be the first state to create a fund for that. To me, it's one of the first environmental justice things. If people can't afford their water, they're in trouble. So that was our focus. We created a team of stakeholders to do this over the past 2.5 years, monthly meetings, and it's just been wonderful. And I think we'll do it this year, and we'll be the first state to have one. And that's one of those things. If we don't have affordable water for a large section of our population, they can't get the work done that they need to get. And that's when the old infrastructure has problems. So that's a really important thing that we're trying to do. And without that, it's hard to have any kind of environmental justice. So I think that's something that really makes a difference in the long run. We're running out of time. Anything else we haven't talked about that you'd like to mention?
Well, I just want to say I'm so heartened to hear about these efforts around water affordability. I commend you for that. I'm really excited to be addressing that piece of it in our coverage. And you're absolutely right in thinking a lot about environmental justice, affordability. I mean, we're living in a system where we have to pay for these things, and not everybody can afford them. And what are the implications of that? So I really appreciate you highlighting that issue. I think in general, I could talk with you all day, I feel like, about all of these issues. I'm just really excited to kind of get to work to see how the initiative can evolve. And I'm also so grateful for the sort of foundation that has been laid by, Ward Detweiler, former host, Sandy Svoboda, who was at the helm as program director of the Great Lakes Now initiative for years. And now it feels like we have a real sort of solid footing in place. And I'm really excited to see how things evolve from here.
I'm really happy. I'm looking forward to following where you guys go, and I'd love to have you back at some point in the future and talk about these things because again, your education efforts are just so needed because so many people just don't really understand any of this stuff, and with operations like mine. people don't know how we set rates, how our systems work. I try to do a lot of education around that. This is one of those efforts, this show here. I do talks at libraries. People want to know, and people, anytime a ballot initiative back in early in the aughts, it passed 75 to 25 to fund water and environmental programs, and we're still using that money. So people get it. People in Michigan are more aware of water than any place I've ever lived, and they really get it. When something is in front of them that says we're going to protect water, they're very interested. They want to back that kind of thing. So I think your show does a real service in getting that message out, getting people educated about these things, and I really appreciate that.
Oh, thank you so much for that, Jim. And, hearing you talk a little bit about the education piece of it, I do just want to make a note that we also have been kind of working and deepening our relationship and collaborations with the Michigan Learning Channel. So, we're trying to educate the adults who watch the program, but we also have a really excellent education sort of specialist who's creating lesson plans that are standards aligned based on different segments in every monthly episode. And folks can always learn more about that, too, over at greatlakesnow.org/education.
Oh, that's terrific. I do an annual stormwater summit for the Southeast Michigan region. Actually, it's October 20th this year. I'd love to have you come talk to us about these kind of things and what you guys do at some point, maybe next year. I'll reach out to you. I think that would be wonderful because people need to know how they can get more information, how they can help you get your message out, because it's going to serve us all. And, I work with local governments. I work with the universities here. I work with of course, Eagle and EPA, and we're all so much on the same page, and we're all working in a really, really good collaborative way, and it's good because we had stresses before, and things are doing a lot better in terms of collaborating as a region. So I think we're doing well, and again, that education of what you're doing is terrific, and. So if there's nothing else, I really appreciate you being here, and I hope you'll come back again sometime, and we can talk more.
I'm looking forward to it.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching.